The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
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 Liberty. Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
Cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The first 100 days of the Joe Biden presidency. What to make of it? Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. The 46th president punctuates the first benchmark of his new administration with his first quasi-State of the Union speech, proposing trillions in new spending. We will analyze the agenda laid out by Biden and consider whether any of it is new and how ultimately Joe Biden is serving as nothing less than a bagman for the far left. And we'll discuss the growing troubles of Vice President Kamala Harris and the border crisis and disturbing revelations about John Kerry and Iran. Plus, has parental pushback against leftist indoctrination in schools begun to take root? We'll discuss with LibertyNation.com's Pennel Bird. And LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza examines threats and promising developments regarding your individual liberty in Talkin' Liberty.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We commence the proceedings with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. In a sparsely populated, socially distanced House chamber, Joe Biden gave his first national address before what was called a joint session of Congress. The applause echoing through the hollow, more than half-empty chamber, an eerie reminder of the dark times we've been through over the last 14, 15 months, as the 46th president ticked off all the things he says he has overcome in his first 100 days and reverted to the highfalutin rhetoric we've come to know.
The worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Now, after just 100 days, I can report to the nation, America is on the move again. We've stared into the abyss of insurrection and autocracy, pandemic and pain, and we, the people, did not flinch. We have to come together to heal the soul of this nation.
Soul of this nation in the hands of Joe Biden, who intends to use those hands to reach into your pockets to the tune of around $6 trillion.
The American Jobs Plan will put engineers and construction workers to work building more energy-efficient buildings and homes. My American Families Plan guarantees 4 additional years of public education for every person in America. We need to ensure greater equity and opportunity for women. And while we're doing this, let's get the Paycheck Fairness Act to my desk as well. And by the way, while you're thinking about sending things to my desk, let's raise the minimum wage to $15.
Sure, what the hell? The national debt's already approaching $30 trillion, so while we're at it with the monopoly money, why don't we just go ahead and force businesses to raise wages to a point where they either cut jobs or go out of business? And Senator Tim Scott called him out in the GOP response to the president, starting with public schools.
Our public schools should have reopened months ago. Other countries did. Private and religious schools did. Science has shown for months that schools are safe. They spent almost $2 trillion on a partisan bill that the White House bragged was the most liberal bill in American history. Only 1% went to vaccinations, no requirement to reopen schools promptly. Another issue that should unite us is infrastructure. Less than 6% of the president's plan goes to roads and bridges. It's a liberal wish list of big government waste.
Tim Scott is no doubt a rising star. More on him in a minute. But in the meantime, the vice president, who's appeared in public infrequently, except when issues of race are involved, has famously been assigned to head up this president's salvage operation at the southern border, where illegals have entered the country at the highest rate in 20 years since the new administration took office and summarily reversed the border policies of Donald Trump. But Kamala Harris has yet to even visit the border, and this week made a very strange remark, which led to a question from the only reporter who seems to ask hard questions of the White House Press Secretary Jan Psaki, Fox's Peter Doocy, and elicited a strange response.
Vice President Harris says that she's not gone to the border yet because we have to deal with COVID issues. What is she referring to?
Well, I would certainly have to ask her team about that specifically, but I would tell you also that her focus is not on the border. It's on addressing the root causes in the Northern Triangle. And that's why the majority of her time has been spent on working with, on a diplomatic level.
Oh, okay. So the answer to the border crisis is to get at the root causes of the problem in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. In other words, let's fix the problems they have, which leads to refugees leaving their countries, which become our problem, as if Kamala Harris can step in and fix the problem. Most likely, she's offering massive increases in foreign aid as, shall we say, an inducement to these Northern Triangle countries to straighten up and fly right. But news comes regarding another part of the world, Iran, where a top Iranian official has been caught on a leaked video claiming John Kerry, current climate czar, and former Secretary of State under Barack Obama, shared military secrets about Israel with him during the Trump administration. A slew of Republicans are calling for Kerry's resignation, and Trump's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo laid it down.
While I was briefing President Trump, Kerry was briefing Zarif on intelligence that related to Israeli operations. I hope that's not true. John Kerry needs to come forward. Secretary Kerry needs to speak to the American people and explain to them why he was meeting with Zarif. We know he did that. He's admitted as much. What he was talking about. We believe that he was absolutely telling the Iranians, hang on, this pressure campaign, the power that's being exerted by America against you, it'll be over. We'll win this election. It'll just be 4 years. You can hang in there. Don't for a minute negotiate with the Trump team. And so Secretary Kerry's got an awful lot of explaining to do.
None of which is likely forthcoming. But then the elite media will likely provide John Kerry with all the protection he needs to stay on the job and continue commanding the climate. And at the same time, they will go hard and unfairly after conservatives who look like rising stars. 60 Minutes tried to take apart Florida Governor Ron DeSantis a couple of weeks ago, and now a prominent Washington newspaper is raising doubts about the black Republican senator who delivered the response to Joe Biden's address to Congress, who we referenced earlier, Tim Scott, specifically questioning his claims about his forebears and picking cotton and just how poor they really were. And they use the old yellow journalism technique of casting doubt without clear evidence, which the second-ranking House Republican Steve Scalise says is actually evidence that the left is scared of Tim Scott.
There's nothing that scares the left more than a conservative African-American leader who's gaining respect nationally on his own, not pushing the false narrative of the left, but talking about individual opportunity. Tim Scott was the one who authored Opportunity Zones, and I'm sure they'll try to now fact check that. Go get it. The fact that they're going after him shows how scared the left is of him, and they should be scared of him because he's a great person and he's a rising star in our party.
Most informed observers believe Tim Scott will throw his hat into the 2024 presidential ring, along with many other Republicans, unless, of course, Trump runs again. But the kind of smears the left is unleashing on the rising stars from the right proves what? That they'll do anything to win? That they'll lie, cheat, and steal? That they'll promise one thing and deliver another? No, that's common to politicians of every stripe. Instead, the famed actress and activist Rose McGowan, who knows of what she speaks on the issue, goes a big step further, saying she believes the Democratic Party has become a cult.
I grew up in a cult, and it was a very famous cult called Children of God. It gave me the ability to see the control and the propaganda machine. And I do believe Democrats, most especially, are in a deep cult that they really don't know about and aren't really aware of. And I leave the Republicans alone more because I do respect people more that are like, this is what we are, this is what we're about, this is what we're against. Whereas I find that the Democrats are really pretty much almost against all the same things. They're for keeping a system in place that is for so few people and benefits so few, but they masquerade as the helpers.
It's called false virtue signaling, which the left has seemed to perfect as an art form. But is there no one on the left who can speak beyond their woke base, who can appeal to both the woke and unwoke among us? Well, if you're like me, you gave up watching the Oscars years ago. But there was one speech worthy of note this year because it came from a leftist receiving a humanitarian award and calling for a stop to the hate from all sides. Actor and producer Tyler Perry.
My mother taught me to refuse hate. She taught me to refuse blanket judgment. And in this time, and with all of the internet and social media and algorithms and everything that wants us to think a certain way, the 24-hour news cycle, it is my hope that all of us would teach our kids, and not only to remember, just refuse hate. Don't hate anybody. I refuse to hate someone because they are Mexican or because they are black or white. I refuse to hate someone because they are a police officer. And I want to take this Jean Hersel Humanitarian Award and dedicate it to anyone who wants to stand in the middle, no matter what's around the walls, stand in the middle, because that's where healing happens. That's where conversation happens. That's where change happens. It happens in the middle.
The middle, the center. The question is, will the center hold in these times of tribal warfare? Quick break, and then we're back to discuss what parents are doing to push back against leftist indoctrination in schools.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com. With one click, you get tomorrow's news today with LNTV's Hot Topics and Analysis, Liberty Nation Radio, The Uprising and Rabbit Hole podcasts, and dozens of insightful original articles. And now, you can keep your kids ahead of the curve with LNGenZ.com. LN Gen Z brings a free-thinking education right into your home for students of every grade level with articles, videos, worksheets, and ready-to-go curriculum. While the media establishment giants are sleeping, you can stay ahead of the curve with LibertyNation.com and get tomorrow's news today. LibertyNation.com.
We believe that all men are entitled to blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The woke agenda and critical race theory. Are they destroying public education? Critical race theory posits that the American founding was not for the purpose of liberty in the creation of a new independent republic, but specifically to further expand the reach of slavery begun in foreign lands, to establish a new beachhead for slavery. LibertyNation.com's Pennel Bird, an elementary school teacher himself, has written at some length on this subject. And he spoke on a recent edition of Liberty Nation TV about how the woke train is on the fast track since the 2020 election.
The critical race train has been barreling across the landscape of America at sort of breakneck speed. I mean, it's been hard, I think, to adjust to the sheer velocity with which it's sort of overtaking education in this country. Critical race theory is being applied, throughout the curriculum and across really all aspects of education.
But while the election of Biden and a Democratic Congress, barely, sent the woke train barreling out of the station, it's not like this happened overnight.
It has its roots in the late 60s, really. It's been gestating, if you will, in my mind, like a little bit of a terror cell. In academia, the higher levels of academia, a lot of the radicals from the 60s took jobs at the universities and slowly but surely have been sort of indoctrinating, inculcating students to their mindsets for many, many years. It's just now reaching a critical mass in the last few years. I think President Trump's tenure in office spiked a lot of passion, obviously, on the left. And now that the Democrats have won the White House and two branches of government, they have what they view as the wind beneath their wings. It's the one thing I feel like the Democrats have been completely honest about. They said, we're going to change America, and they're doing it at breakneck speed. And critical race theory is critical to that view. And it really started, I think, with the 1619 Project, which was a New York Times, under the aegis of the New York Times, which was disparaged left and right by known historians, but it didn't really matter.
Yeah, it really didn't matter because that's the narrative. That's their story, and they're sticking to it, regardless of its utter falsehood. And another of the tentacles of this wokeness in education is the abolition of advanced studies, now considered an offense to equity, the latest mantra on the left. And as Pennel explains, it's happening right now just miles from the U.S. Capitol in heavily populated Loudoun County, Virginia, where the school board laid down their controversial edict.
We are no longer going to offer Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry until 11th grade. So no accelerated math until 11th grade, which leaves out sort of high-achieving kids who are doing well in math and may have future careers in math. What undergirds this is the idea that there are, a fair amount of kids and often some minority kids who don't do well in math. So rather than sort of try to encourage that in some way, what they're doing is saying, well, because it looks like it besmirches the achievement of those groups, we're going to get rid of it. Parents have been apoplectic, understandably, about it.
And the country should be also, because we know a woke, dumbed down, watered down education will hardly prepare students to compete in this big bad world. Quick break, and then we're back to discuss how Joe Biden has become a bagman for the far left.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Joe Biden has now passed that famed initial benchmark of his new presidency, first established by fellow Democrat FDR, the first 100 days. So how to describe what we've seen so far of this successor to Donald Trump? Well, there's a familiar expression in popular culture relating to a person who serves as a hard-scrabble deal closer for his boss. The expression was first used to describe a traveling salesman peddling someone else's product. though it now often evokes someone looking to collect money or favors for an organized crime operation. But there's also political versions of the same. People who don't make decisions, but perform the bidding for those who do. It's called a bagman. And given what we've witnessed over these first days of the Biden presidency, we have good reason to believe this is exactly what we elected. In fact, going one step further and examining the initiatives of the early days of the administration, it would hardly be hyperbole to describe the entire process of Biden's nomination and election as little more than yet another old-time expression, bait and switch. I mean, did Joe Biden ever decry America as systemically racist in the 47 years of his political career before 2020? Did he ever previously describe it as a stain on the soul of the country? Was he not always opposed to packing the courts prior to this year? Did he not speak publicly against ending the Senate filibuster at every opportunity until now? Did he not deny, after saying the opposite on many previous occasions, that he would attempt to impose a green energy agenda on an unwitting nation? And did he not promise a safer, more humane border before reversing Trump's border policies just for the sake of reversing them because Trump set the policies? But the bottom line question is, did not the Democratic Party clear the presidential field to hand Joe Biden their nomination specifically because he was viewed by voters as reliably moderate? Does what we're seeing and hearing out of this White House even remotely resemble the Joe Biden of 1973 or 88 or 2008 or 2016 or even the 2020 campaign? This chief executive has pulled off the oldest political parlor trick in the book, one designed strictly to deceive and confound the voters. Run as a centrist, govern as a leftist. But in Biden's case, he's serving as the repository for radical notions which offend the essentials of this constitutional republic, ideas far to the left of those which have animated his almost half century in the D.C. swamp. Indeed, there's little doubt that Joe Biden is delivering the goods for some committee or collection of hard leftists who failed to launch a successful candidacy of their own and thus turned to Biden as the harmless public face for their most radical ideas. And he has also dutifully complied with their demands, no doubt as part of an implicit agreement. Here's how it probably went. They would reluctantly get behind his candidacy, because who else was there, and do everything in their power to take Trump down. Biden, in turn, would remain silent as their most radical elements set the nation ablaze over last summer. And upon reaching the promised land on Pennsylvania Avenue, he would serve as their bagman. If your own eyes don't provide sufficient proof of this entente between a decades-long career politician and the shadowy forces controlling his presidency, consider one most revealing recent episode which fully unmasked the truth of what happens when Joe Biden attempts to think for himself. Desperate to control a border crisis that threatens his presidency, he decided to reverse course and restore the Trump-era limits on entry, and was swiftly rebuked by whatever group of leftists are commanding his agenda. So he promptly reversed his decision again. The powers behind the curtain can't have this guy thinking he got some sort of mandate to do as he pleases, as if voters viewed him as anything more than not Trump. So Biden projected to a nationwide primetime audience in his first quasi-State of the Union address the ongoing themes ordered by his masters: systemic racism, climate change, catastrophe, and all the rest. And true to his first 100 days, he dressed it all up with a pleasant bow for popular consumption. Joe Biden may believe he's sitting pretty as the pandemic-weary nation returns to its feet. In fact, he may even get plucky enough to try making another decision that is not simply a knee-jerk reversal of something Trump did. But rest assured that if he steps out of line again and refuses to obey orders from his shadowy commanding officers, they will soon teach him afresh that absent his obedience, the success of his presidency is hardly in the bag. Quick break, and then we'll return with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we have reached the portion of Liberty Nation Radio which we entitle Talkin' Liberty. It is when we reintroduce our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, and the man who proclaims himself, oh, wait a minute, we proclaim him.
Yeah, come on now. It's a whole
we proclaim him
right, if I do
our
myself.
guardian of individual liberty, Scott David Cosenza. He merits the full name.
A rare occasion.
On rare
Thank you so much.
That is increasingly frequent.
Yeah.
Now, you've written a good piece on LibertyNation.com about the first juror from the Chauvin trial that has gone public, and you raised questions about Chauvin's Fifth Amendment rights and whether that could possibly lead to a successful appeal.
Tim, let me object and say that it's a very good piece, not just a good piece. And the reason why is because I'm talking about something that it seems like nobody else is talking about, or very few are anyway. And because of narrative-based reporting, I think that's, if I would speculate on the reason why, it's juror number 52, Brandon Mitchell is the man's name. And he appeared on Good Morning America. And he said that in direct response to a question by Robin Roberts, his interviewer, asked if they held it against Chauvin that he didn't take the stand. And the man said that they did. He said that they wanted to hear his story. And, in two instances, he talked about how those jurors wanted to hear what he was thinking and what was going through Chauvin's mind, and that it worked to his detriment. Now, it's so important that jurors not hold defendants in a negative regard for refusing to take the stand and testifying in their own defense, that the judge actually has a separate little mini hearing during the trial in which he directly asks the defendant whether they want to testify and talks to them about their decision, right, to understand whether it's like freely chosen, right, rather they're not unduly influenced by their attorney or someone else. That's how important it is. And then, Tim, in Minnesota, Judge Cahill asks the defendant, we can give a special instruction if you like. And that instruction says the jurors are not allowed to make any negative inferences from the defendant not testifying. Chauvin took that instruction and the judge gave it, but to no avail, apparently.
Now, conventional wisdom is that a defendant should be very careful about taking the stand himself in cases like this. But it's your sense that this should have been an exception, that Chauvin would have helped his cause significantly if he had taken the stand?
That's not the point. The point is that the jurors are committing a
constitutional
violation.
I understand, but the jurors are saying that they believe that would have helped their deliberations.
And if you went to that juror for legal advice, you'd be on a fool's errand. I'd trust Mr. Nelson's legal advice, which I'm suggesting that Mr. Chauvin likely did. And anytime he would be on the stand, they would be like piranhas
they would savage him.
Meat.
I mean, they would savage him because he had a previous history with George Floyd.
Yeah. Well, they would savage him, Tim, just because if you know what you're doing, you can turn any inconsistency into a huge problem. And the thing is, Tim, we can never be 100% consistent because we're human beings. So what happens is Chauvin says he comes and he parked his cruiser on the east side of the street, right? And then later on, it's shown pictures where it's on the west side of the street. And instead of that just being an error of him forgetting where he parked his cruiser on that day, now it becomes a a point that I can drive home. So when you lied to us about parking on the east side of the street, it's like,
so which is it? How are we supposed to know when you're telling the truth and when you're not? Yeah.
Any good lawyer can kind of make hay out of that, which is why typically defendants don't. One of the rare cases you see in homicide prosecutions where defendants will take the stand is when they are alleging that they committed a lawful use of deadly force, because then they're kind of saying, well, I was just responding to being attacked. And you'll often see them take the stand in that regard. But this kind of thing, no, and it's probably the best thing he could have done.
Okay, the Supreme Court back in action. Couple of big things they're doing. The first, they're hearing a case on regulation by schools of off-campus speech. And this is a bit of a thorny issue. There's probably good arguments to be made on both sides of this particular argument.
Tim, in like 1999 or 2000, when I met you, we worked on a video series called The Bill of Rights and You. And one of the principal cases that we featured in that was Tinker v. Des Moines. It's the main school free speech case in the books, and up until today it is. And this case, which is called Mahoney School District v. BL, might replace Tinker, Tim, for being the main kind of rule that establishes the bright line for how school districts can regulate speech. In Tinker, they were wearing black armbands to protest the Vietnam War, the United States' participation in it, and the school district disciplined the students and said they couldn't. And the rule that was articulated by the court was, as long as it didn't constitute a serious disruption to the educational process, basically, then the speech would be allowed. But then there was a clear line about off-campus speech versus on-campus speech. Now with social media, it's sort of blurred, right? So this woman named Brandy Levy, who was a 14-year-old sophomore at the time of the incident, she just spouted off some F-bombs about not making the varsity cheerleading squad. Super tame. She didn't target anybody. Like, she didn't direct a campaign of harassment or anything like that. She was just upset about not making the varsity cheer squad. She was off campus, and she sent out a Snapchat, which apparently expires in 24 hours. Some helpful classmate of Brandy's, though, made a record of it by taking a screen cap and then showed it to the coach. They suspended her for a year. And Tim, it looks like, based on the oral arguments, that we're going to get a pro-free speech ruling out of this court. I know that Lisa Donner actually wrote about it. The Strange Bedfellows involved in the case.
Yes.
It's always good, I think, when groups can coalesce under a banner of more freedom for Americans. So there was a few questions from the justices on both sides of the aisle that kind of encouraged me to think that there's going to be a good ruling.
Now, the Supreme Court seems to have been hesitant to dive into maybe what we would call the deepest controversies of the day. In recent times, it was an election year, you're getting a new justice on and Amy Coney Barrett, etc. But it looks like they're prepared to make a significant ruling on whether the Second Amendment includes a right to carry.
I think they're properly stated. The cowardice, I think, is the word you're looking there for.
Well, that's up to you, counselor, to make that assessment.
Yeah, their failure to address this issue before now, but apparently we are going to get it now. That case is a New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case brought to challenge the denial of permitting. New York State has the may issue type of permit. There's two types of permits generally that can be offered in the gun world by states: shall issue and may issue. And the right way to think about it is just like a driver's license is a shall issue permit. If you present yourself with the proper birth certificate, whatever, you pass the test and your eyes are okay, you get your driver's license. You don't have to convince the examiner that you have a good reason to operate a motor vehicle. You deserve that benefit from the government, right? But that's what happens with the gun thing. They don't have any objective criteria whatsoever. So they can't, they can say like, well, you can't be a felon, you have to have a cash business. They could put any number of criteria together that they want, but it should be objective criteria. That's what the plaintiffs in this case are arguing. So, does the Constitution confer, or the Second Amendment confer, a right to carry firearms outside the home? We know, Tim, in 2021, it confers a right to gay marriage, for instance, which, as I look at the document, it's kind of a little hard to see it in there. So it seems like the gun the gun rights issue is a lot easier to find in that document for somebody who wants to. We'll see how the justices, whether they agree with that or not.
Right. Now, this next one, Scott, I didn't drill down on this story. I just saw the headline, but one of the things about neighborhoods that people talk about endlessly is neighbors and their lawns and how well they take care of them or not. And this guy, the Kravitzes, they're sure keeping their lawn awfully long, reflects badly on the neighborhood.
There, huh? Yeah.
But I never thought that anybody could be fined $30,000 as one man was in Florida for an uncut lawn.
The town says that they can fine up to $500 per day for tall grass violations. The man was out of town. He hired somebody to keep up the lawn in his absence, and that person either was sick or died or some other thing that was out of the man's control, and he didn't realize. And then by the time he got the information, the fines had accrued to massive levels. You think about the injustice, even if it didn't go longer than the 1 day of $500 for long grass. Is that really okay with the U.S. Constitution's prohibition against prohibitive fines? I think that this case is going to go the other way on the appellate court side, Tim, and I hope it does, because I think, and God, I hope all Americans think that a $30,000 fine for tall grass, absent causing a fire that burned down a neighborhood or some other scourge that we're unaware of, which didn't happen in this case, is just not okay.
And finally, Scott, we're just taking a deep sigh of relief that the trial of Officer Derek Chauvin is over. And now here comes a trial of Ahmaud Arbery, another racially charged trial to be sure, and whose accused killers are now charged with federal hate crimes.
Yeah, I think that this is just an easy win for the Biden administration, probably politically. We're now, I think, a year and 3 months past the incident, and the state criminal trial is still not even gone underway. They just got appointed a new prosecutor because of a resignation this past week. And it's just difficult to see this as a positive development for liberty, given that people are already being prosecuted for murder at the state level. And we've learned, by the way, some other information since we've talked about Ahmaud Arbery, by the way. And I don't think this is necessarily dispositive of how we should view the murder charges, but we do know now that his theft sprees and nefarious conduct in and around his area were greater than previously thought. He had some nicknames were applied to him at various convenience stores, and the man clearly lived a life of theft and stealing from others, and used a guise of his being like an avid runner as part of it. And it's just widely established over and over again with various instances, unrelated testimonies that were issued before his death. The idea that he was simply a jogger, which is, of course, is what the narrative is from Ben Crump and Lee Merritt and Sean King, is that this was just some jogger who was murdered because he was black. We have seen no evidence of that. In fact, all the evidence points to what the killers suggest, which is that they were trying to protect against somebody stealing and robbing from their neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
Scott Cosenza, legal affairs editor at LibertyNation.com. This program, Liberty Nation Radio and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott, and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, all available on demand at LibertyNation.com and from fine podcast providers everywhere. So that is it for this week, but we will be back at you next week. Same time, same station. Till then, this is Tim Donner saying stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.